Hi everyone, today let's talk about Netflix. Then we'll go over the earnings calendar for today and tomorrow. Then we'll go over smart money versus dumb money. Then we'll go over the charts. Then we'll go over my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Netflix, the first of the big tech companies, announced their earnings today, and you can see they're down just under 4%. It was down up to 10% at one point, but it's recovered a little bit. And really, they didn't do that bad. They beat on the bottom line, which is great, just barely missed here on the top line. And that's not really why they're going down here. We'll talk about subscribers later, but they had their first loss in subscribers a year ago, and they've since recovered from there. They mentioned they released their ad tier at $7 a month, which helped with the competition, and they've been doing pretty well since then. They think that about 100 million households share their accounts, or about 43% of users, and as they start to crack down on this password share, they expect their earnings and revenue to go up. Of course, they'll lose some subscribers, I think, once they do crack down on this, but that was part of their guidance going forward. And going over to the Barron's article just for a moment, they mentioned they added 1.75 million subscribers, 500,000 less than expectations. And I really think this is why they're losing so much money in terms of share price. Right now, their company is very much growth. And if they're not growing, then they're not going to continue to maintain this expensive ratio. In terms of earnings per share, which is heavily based on their current growth. So growth needs to happen to keep their multiple up, and if they stop growing, then their multiple is going to contract. So right now, worried about subscriber growth. They missed on this one. We'll see how they do on the next one. And honestly, like I said, they didn't do awful. Moving over to the smart money versus dumb money chart, I do see this mentioned a lot in stock market channels across YouTube. You can see very consistently when we see the blue line, which is smart money, cross below the red line, which is dumb money. We do tend to see tops in the market. Clear example here. And then as dumb money started to move lower and we bottomed out here, that correlated with a low in the market. And recently we did have that same cross. I did get this chart from FX Evolution on their Twitter account. So if you want to go see it for yourself, it's there. But you can see here we had another move down on smart money. Dumb money continuing to buy this rally. But it is fairly flat compared to some of these other times where it just continued higher. It does look more similar to this move that we had here in mid-2022 where we had a slight cross and then a dip lower and then a bigger rally, which did correlate with the rally. So just keep this chart in mind as you continue to trade. There's certainly some risk to the downside as this chart is fairly consistent in timing tops and bottoms. And moving over to the earnings calendar, so far everything's been pretty good. So J&J beat on the top and bottom line. Bank of America did the same. Netflix missed on the top line like we talked about. Lockheed beat on both top and bottom. Goldman Sachs missed on the top line. And you can see there's actually quite a lot of green here regardless of company size. Interactive Brokers beat on the top line but not on the bottom line, missed just barely. So overall still pretty good. Of course, tomorrow we have the heavy hitter after hours, Tesla coming out. That's going to be a huge impact on the markets. We also have Morgan Stanley here in the morning. The banks have been doing very well, and I would expect that to continue. We also have IBM after hours, generally a pretty interesting one. And then it's always fun to see you have NASDAQ Inc. here coming out in the morning as well. So overall, not super interesting, really just watching Tesla and Morgan Stanley. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&Ps on the hour and the 4 hour, you can see we rallied really aggressively in the pre-market. I did not expect that. We did finish strong into the close, and I thought we would maybe come up to this resistance and pull back, but you can see we overthrew that level very strongly, came all the way back to below the close yesterday, and then rallied kind of weakly here into the close, which is interesting. This trend is still very much bullish, so you would expect this to continue. It's probably just a shorter term pullback. This is also a higher low setup versus the previous low. So you would expect this to get above 414.69. Looks pretty much the same here on the 4 hour. It is worth noting that momentum is basically zero here on the 4 hour. So watching 414.69, if that level breaks down, looking back down at trend support around 413.14. Decent volume, a little bit higher than yesterday's volume in the bullish direction. So bull trend still intact. And right now that is how I'm trading it. Moving over to the NASDAQ here, same thesis in the pre-market, rallied super aggressively, held on to my call. Fortunately, this looked extremely weak here at the open, and then we broke down all the way to yesterday's close, and then chopped sideways for the entire rest of the day. Very interesting price action here. Couple of wicks to the downside, found support, came back up into this zone. Still below VWAP on the 15-minute chart, but you can see we're moving a little bit higher here after hours. Big volume on the last candle of the day as well. 4-hour chart, not much to say, continuing to go sideways, right in that area of highest volume. That's where we found support here today. You can see wicks right at that level. We're also just slightly above this downtrend line that we were watching for this kind of bull flag type setup. And same thesis going into tomorrow here. You would expect this support to hold, maybe come up and retest the pre-market highs from today, maybe get up and test 321.82. That's the highs going back to March 4th. That would definitely be interesting here. But overall, same thesis. We have a low, higher low setup, potentially looking for a higher high going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. Similar thesis between these two, both in a bullish trend. Pretty weak bullish trend, but still bullish. You can see the Russell came up to that upper resistance line, gapped up from yesterday's close, found rejection all the way down to our support line, stopped right at that level, 177.33. We've been watching that level for a long time, and that is where we found support and rallied into the close. I did end up adding some positions in there on the Russell. I think we're probably going to go higher into tomorrow's session, looking at 179.17 as your price target to the upside. If we break that level, then we're looking up around 181.30 or so. Looking at the Dow, this one's been kind of tough to trade here, so it is really just grinding up here. You can see bearish momentum below the SMA here on the RSI. Volume pretty minimal, but we just continue to hold the 21 EMA here on the 4-hour chart. Same thesis, wick to the upside, wick to the downside, and then rallied into the close. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple continues to channel within this wedge, just can't get above or below it. Wicked to those highs, got rejected, found support at the 9 EMA on the 4-hour chart. Basically no change from yesterday. Getting very close, getting below the SMA here on RSI. I'll be watching for that going into tomorrow's session or maybe Wednesday session. Looking at Tesla here, slowly drifting up, but still stuck between the 188.50 level and the 182.09 level. Still in this range, going sideways. We've chopped around the 21 and 9 EMAs here as just stepping on them. You can tell it's very sideways. 55 and 144 EMAs here to the upside. Can't get above those levels. We did wick them yesterday. We also wicked them going back to 12 April. So slowly declining EMAs. We'll see if this ends up pushing it down or if we break those levels going into tomorrow's session. Obviously, we have Tesla earnings, which is interesting. Momentum moving towards the bearish side. RSI is also below the SMA here. Bearish volume, definitely interesting. Obviously, earnings will determine direction. It does seem like these EMAs might provide upper resistance until this breaks down below the 182 level. Moving over to Netflix and Microsoft. You can see Netflix had that huge pin bar all the way down to 295. And then we're actually up on earnings now, which is pretty ridiculous. Just since I was filming this video, it was down about 4%. Right on the announcement, it was down 10%, and now we're positive on earnings, so definitely interesting. We'll see what happens after the earnings call, but right now it seems like we're holding in this range, holding above the 200 SMA on the 4-hour chart as well. Multiple levels of support to the downside. We do have a high and lower high set up here, which is interesting. Waiting to see if this drifts down and makes a lower low versus this low from mid-March. Overall, slightly bearish despite the earnings. Otherwise, looking at Microsoft, not a lot to add here. Continues to trend up, continues to hold the trend line. Can't quite get above 292. If we get above that level, might be a pretty bullish push, but it's probably not going to do that before earnings, in my opinion. Moving over to staples versus discretionary, you can see staples making a higher high versus yesterday's high. We also have a new high close for the day. So we closed at 75.87, getting very close to that 76 level. We'll probably hit that tomorrow. Does look like we're starting to break out here. It looks nice. Discretionary, on the other hand, gapped up like everything else, fell into the mid-session. Found support at the wick high from Friday, did fill the gap, did find a little bit of support, but it gap down here on the last candle of the day. We closed at 148.18 and we're currently at 147.97, so definitely interesting there. Still holding the 9 EMA, still in this supply zone. And also looking at momentum here, you can see it's fading, moving in the bearish direction. We're also at the SMA on RSI. This does break through here. We should expect more downside, potentially down to this previous consolidation high, down around 146. I have my 147 level as well that I was watching. But if this breaks down below this area of supply, this could be a high, lower high setup. That would be interesting. And that would be a change from the higher high, low, higher low setup that we had coming into this zone. So that would be a trend change. And that would be interesting to see here on discretionary. Moving over to transports, we've been talking about this wedge here. We threw a huge wick up to the 55 EMA here on the daily chart and then got very quick rejection. We're back under that level here. So resistance held. Now we're waiting to see what happens. So if we get a deeper pullback, retest this lower bound of the wedge one more time, that would be interesting. And then we get a breakout. But right now, structure is still intact with a little bit of a fake out breakout here on transports. Moving over to semiconductors on the 2-hour and the daily, you can see we gapped up like everything else through a big wick to the upside, took out the high here from Friday. RSI showing a bounce at the SMA. Momentum is fading. We did get 3 legs of downside, but did bounce into the close here. So looking at this head and shoulders still, but if this starts to rally, that's going to be interesting. Momentum on the daily chart stepping towards bullishness. And remember, this is still a very bullish pattern. So head and shoulders was looking for that neck break. Couple of wicks there. But if this continues higher here, that's probably going to carry the NASDAQ with it. We'll probably see some more outperformance in the NASDAQ if this does continue into the rest of the week. Moving over to yields, not much has changed. Did get a little bit of a breather on the daily chart for both of these. 2-year yields gone sideways. 10-year yield pulled back a little bit, retesting that level at 357. Still above that level, and if we do get a continuation, that should be a little bit bearish for stocks. Momentum on both is still very bullish. RSI on both still shows bullish, so probably just a breather. Still looking for a continuation here on yields. Moving over to the dollar, you can see we came into that resistance and sold off. Very similar structure actually to this previous sell-off, almost identical. And the rally into this zone actually looked very similar as well. Push, pause, push, push, pause, push. And now we have that first move down. And if we get another sideways day or so, and then another continuation down, that's going to be very similar to this structure as well. Momentum and RSI on the 4-hour chart is saying that's going to happen. It is worth noting that price is still above the 21 EMA here on the 4-hour chart, which was not the case at this previous move down. We are still below the 55 EMA here though, which is the same situation as we had before. So we're kind of stuck in these EMAs a little bit more this time. On this iteration, you can see we were below all the EMAs before we had that bigger move down, and now we're kind of trapped in between them a little bit more. Moving over to the daily chart, we actually had a step into bullish territory on MACD, which is very interesting despite the move down. That definitely didn't happen on the move down last time. We'll see if we get a little bit of follow through on this bullish momentum. That would be interesting. RSI is still above the SMA here on the daily chart. So a couple of indicators potentially showing some bullishness. But more realistically, it looks like we're going to get another iteration of this down move to support, and then we'll see what happens from there. Moving over to JNK, not much is happening here. Still consolidating in this zone, very similar to the NASDAQ. Hit resistance here today at 92.50 after the gap up, got rejection, very similar to what we've seen across the board. Daily chart, just jumping around, gaps everywhere, candles of indecision, not much is happening. Momentum slowly fading, RSI is right on top. And remember, this is a wedge as well, so could go either direction, but we're generally in the vicinity of resistance. And it does seem more likely that we're going to get another pullback before we find support at this lower area. And if that happens, maybe we overthrow it a little bit and we get a slingshot above this upper resistance, that could be very bullish. But right now, we really have no clear direction here on high yields. Moving over to the VIX here, similar thesis to yesterday. We just continue to downtrend, holding the 21 EMA here on the hourly chart. Looking at the weekly chart, I do want to highlight this downtrend line that we were watching since about February of this year. We held this level last time before we had that bigger rally, and at this point, if we continue lower here, you have to expect that we're going to come into contact with this trend line down around 1550 or so. That would be very interesting. That level also correlates with horizontal support here from the June 2021 lows here on the VIX. If we come into that area, certainly something to watch. But right now, the VIX is consistently trending down. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I made a few bucks. We ended up unchanged here pretty much on the NASDAQ. Went all the way down to 318 on the Netflix news. And then we rallied right back to unchanged on the day. You can see I have $36 profit on these two puts here. So there's another $2 in there that should hit my account once these expire. I also have two 316 puts here for 41 cents each going into tomorrow's session. And then once again here, I have a 320 call, which continues to work out for 60 cents. So still neutral on the NASDAQ going into tomorrow's session. I also picked up a 177 put on the IWM in both accounts. You can see I sold the put here in my individual account slightly later, so it's in a $1 profit, whereas my position here in my Roth is down $4. Overall, not too bad. I actually rolled this up from 176, so that's why you see a $0 profit day on my Roth position. Again, getting pretty close to that zero line. That would be great. If we continue to rally here on the IWM, certainly seems possible. Overall, Russell still looks strong. NASDAQ still looks neutral. And then we'll see what happens as we move into Tesla earnings tomorrow. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of Netflix earnings. Are they going to be able to keep their multiple, or are we going to see a bigger pullback after the huge wick down that we had in Netflix? Also, let me know what you think of Tesla earnings coming up tomorrow. Do you have any positions? Are you planning to get a position in Tesla? Definitely a tough one. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.